millions of people will be suffering from long COVID symptoms, which is pretty sad because these people will be suffering needlessly for, you know, just a virus that they, came in contact with. I have a friend who suffers from long COVID, got it several times, and now they deal with a lot of brain fog and stuff because of it. COVID, attacks every single part of the body, and the brain and heart is two of the biggest organs that are affected.
Loss of smell in long COVID patients could be a sign of decreased brain activity. A new study shows COVID is causing changes in the areas where the brain detects and helps people to understand what they're smelling. But that's not the only symptom of long COVID, which affects a lot of people. The U.S. is reporting more than 6% of American adults are currently seeing long COVID effects, or rather, long term effects from the coronavirus.
Which means those people will likely either be out of work because of their symptoms, struggle with maintaining work, or on welfare because of it, which is uh, we need to honestly increase the help and aid towards people with like long COVID symptoms because they're going to severely struggle with being able to either keep work or gain enough income to, survive.
So I want to bring in a Jody Guest to talk a little bit more about long COVID. She's a professor at the Rowland School of Public Health at Emory University in Atlanta. She's also the vice chair of the school's Department of Epidemiology. Thank you so much for joining us today. We talked so much about long COVID, I don't know, say a year ago, and warned that this would be an ongoing issue, and then we don't talk about it anymore, it seems. This is the fourth consecutive month where the number of Americans facing long COVID has shrunk.
The reason it's not really talked about is because, you know, businesses and business owners don't really care that there's a bunch of people with long COVID symptoms. All they care about is that they have, enough healthy people to work. And it's like, well, F off, people that are sick. We don't care. You may have worked for us during the pandemic, but now that you can't work, who really cares? And the same with the government. They don't really care as much as they should. These people need a whole lot of help in order to be able to deal with their symptoms for the rest of their lives.
That is good news. But why do you think that's happening?
Well, hopefully that's because COVID cases have been going down,
Hmm.
which is a great sign for us to be looking for. But what we know is we still have about 28% of people who've had COVID who are experiencing symptoms of long
I
COVID.
should
And that's still a
clarify.
tremendously high number.
Sorry, not to jump into it, but I should clarify because my question was incorrect. In fact, the numbers have not shrunk. So that is concerning.
They
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So we're seeing COVID cases go down, but again, about 28% of people who've had COVID are experiencing symptoms of long COVID. And again, that's a really high number. That has a tremendous effect on our workforce as well as we think about people who have real problems with daily life.
Um, so, the thing about long COVID is it seems like there's a laundry list of symptoms. How does someone know if you have long COVID? Because I think anyone who's had COVID now, if you feel a little drowsy, if you have allergies and you didn't before, you start to wonder whether or not it's connected to long COVID or to COVID.
Absolutely. And I think one of the problems with long COVID is we certainly don't even know exactly how many people have it
Mhm.
because the signs and symptoms can be very vague. They also can just feel like a continuation of your COVID. And you don't really know when you need to move from I have COVID to I have long COVID. So, what we're looking for are people who have persistent symptoms And this tiredness and fatigue is actually the number one symptom, which again can feel really vague to a lot of people. But when it starts to affect your daily life, if it gets worse after activity or even mental activity, that's something when you want to seek some help and talk to a clinician.
I've experienced like extreme fatigue and tiredness due to altitude sickness, so I can definitely understand the type of fatigue and stuff you would get from a long COVID symptom that caused you to be, more fatigued and stuff. And it's not a great feeling. You just, do a minor task and you're just extremely tired. When it happened to me, all I could do was, you know, kind of cry because it's like, why am I so tired all the time? At that time, I didn't really understand, but there are some people who have, long COVID symptoms and they haven't really connected that it's to COVID. So they're having a whole lot of issues and struggles dealing with their new issues and symptoms that they have.
2 weeks ago, President Biden signed legislation ending the national emergency for COVID-19. What sort of impact do you think that could have, considering the number of people who are still struggling with these symptoms?
In my opinion, that is very detrimental to the health of society. Um, the uh, the harder it is for people to uh, be able to afford, uh, um, healthcare, the worse it is for society because that means more sicker people, uh, and that's uh, the less people that are able to, you know, function in society, the worse it is going to be because uh, these people are not going to be able to, actually live in society and, have a good life. This is why we need to have a better healthcare system, one that, people are able to afford and, have some kind of preventive medication and stuff like that.
So that's really a policy issue, and there's a difference between what we're seeing from public health side and the number of people who have COVID-19 versus a policy. So this is a way to change the way money gets to certain places where they have supported people in extra ways during the pandemic. So we'll see some changes with telehealth. We'll see some changes with access to testing and vaccines. Most of these changes will be drawn out. If you have Medicaid and Medicare, most of your services you've received for COVID-19 in the past 2.5 to 3 years will be protected at least through the fall of 2024. It's really our uninsured population in the United States where we're going to see the biggest impact. And we need to make sure that everyone gets up to date on their vaccines as quickly as possible. And if possible, signs up.
Okay, what we need to do is have, you know, um, uh, ve groups of people and vehicles that can go around the neighborhoods vaccinating people. If you had a vaccine, if you have a up-to-date vaccine, will just be passed over. If you need an up-to-date vaccine, you will be given one, and that will make it easier for everybody to have their vaccine. People won't have to go to some location and, you know, um,
For an insurance coverage.
Doctor, because of the nature, I think, of long COVID, sometimes when people are suffering, it's difficult for them to convince others that they actually are sick. In some cases, it can be very debilitating. What if we